Stand with your brothers!
The warp is not a place. It is hunger given shape, and it stains everything it touches.
Attack!
It does not measure time or space. It seethes with thought, fear, and craving, until it boils into storms of raw energy. In this episode, we study 3 horrors that carry the touch of the warp into the material realm. The Hellbrutes, a condemned warrior entombed within a coffin of iron and flesh. The Chaos Spawn, a failure of creation made manifest. A rolling storm of mutation that knows only pain and appetite. And the Mutalith Vortex Beast, a colossal, incomprehensible creature that moves relentlessly through battlefields. A living abomination that mutates ceramite, bone, and even fate itself as it passes. We weigh their origins, how they are used by the Chaos Legions, and then we will look at methods to end them. Be prepared to explore the horrors of this forbidden lore.
Failure will be met with punishment!
A Hellbrute is, in essence, a Chaos Space Marine dreadnought. A twisted, blasphemous mockery of the revered loyalist dreadnoughts of the Adeptus Astartes. Each one is a towering war machine that imprisons a living Chaos Space Marine within an armored sarcophagus, wired to a mass of conduits and brutal implants. Where loyalist chapters enshrine honored ancients to continue service to the Imperium, the traitor legions impose internment as a penalty and instrument of control. The pilot is kept alive, conscious, and fused to a frame that melds metal with spoiled flesh. The result is not a sanctuary, but a cage that turns agony into motive force and hatred into its only guidance. Some of the first types appeared millennia ago, when captured dreadnoughts and their machine spirits were warped and subjected to terrible predicaments by the men of the traitor legions, until they forgot their old litanies. In the current age, dark mechanicum artificers and warpsmiths hammer out new bodies in demon forges, scrawl plates with forbidden sigils, and lace interiors with memory spikes that force obedience. A Hellbrute's pilot is a Chaos Space Marine who is severely injured and pushed beyond sanity by the endless conflicts of the Long War. Then, the pilot's nervous system is interwoven with the machine's cybernetics, creating a single, horrific entity. The Hellbrute's internal machinery is designed to be a parasitic tormentor, flooding the pilot's senses with constant agony and terrifying nightmares, and by doing so, empowering itself. Accounts describe interiors that mutate into clammy tissue and burrowing worms that grip bone and muscle, fusing man and machine into a single, vile organism. When the frame is reattached and restraint is lifted, Hellbrutes awake, bellowing through cracked Vox grills, crazed by isolation. A rare few retain slivers of memory and comprehend orders. Yet even those soon drown in rage once they are unleashed into the real battlefields. Legions and war bands add distinct profanities. The Thousand Suns cannot draw pilots from dust-bound rubric ranks, so their sorcerers entice supposedly allied renegades with promises of knowledge. But then they are flensed and their body reduced with warp flame, until the betrayed legionary's body is little more than a burnt mass. That is then finally entombed within the Hellbrute. They remain there as they lose their mind, fueling the Hellbrute's systems and perpetuating the rage. The Emperor's children mount resonators that make the hull itself a choir of loud screams that never end, driving the unfortunate pilot to insanity. Iron warriors lace engines with siege augers and send them forward to draw fire while sappers advance. The Death Guard seed plague sacks in cooling veins, so ruptured armor emits clouds of contagion. Corn-marked engines favor close work, trading elaborate guns for extra ferocity in the crush of melee combat. On the fields, a Hellbrute is both a shock unit and terror weapon. Typical patterns pair a heavy gun arm with a crushing limb. Documented armaments include plasma cannons, melta lances, autocannon arrays, Reaper batteries, and twin-linked las weapons. In close quarters, the machines wield power fists, great claws, serrated hammers, and cable-mounted scourges. But even with their guns and limbs wrecked, they advance and tear bunkers and infantry apart with their unnatural strength. The more damage a Hellbrute suffers, the wilder it becomes, which is why Chaos Commanders point it at the foe and then give it distance, rather than attempt careful control over them. Several engines have earned grim renown in tragedy. We are going to mention two of them in this lore exploration. In M41, the Space Marine chapter of the Crimson Sabers descended on the Imperial world of Umidia to crush a rising chaos cult. They halted a Khorne summoning, yet did so by slaughtering the planet's entire population. That atrocity drew a curse that haunted the chapter, and drove it toward the path of rage that birthed the Crimson Slaughter as it transformed and lost Legion. Severian Cranon, birth brother to Chapter Master Sevastus Cranon, refused the bloodlust that seized his kin during the terrible events at Umidia. For his defiance, he was imprisoned by his brothers. The curse gnawed at him in confinement until his mind broke. Warpsmiths finally sealed him within a Hellbrute, and the thing that rose was named Mortis Metallicus, a hulking engine of rage and corruption that claimed many victims to his name. At Bane's Landing, he slew 2 Ravenwing Marines and a Deathwing Terminator before Librarian Termiel and Battle Brother Heskia brought him down. His last act was acceptance, an end he had longed begged for. In another abhorrent case, we have Krieger the Violent, also named Krieger No Eyes, who is a cornet Helbrute, whose empty sockets never clot. He is blind, yet his other senses have sharpened to a cruel edge, and the scent of fresh blood drags him into battle like a chain. He hunts by smell alone, locking onto the scent of blood and charging with piston fists and roaring until everything is crushed beneath him. Once roused, he ignores formations and command, which makes him as perilous to nearby allies as to his foes. Warlords loose him when panic serves better than precision. Then they keep their distance and let his fury run its course. When it comes to Hellbrutes, communication is hazardous and rarely useful. Tech adepts who attempt machine communion report input that feels like a continuous scream. Chaplains who try litanies receive only gurgled mockery.
There is no greater weapon in this whole miserable galaxy than pure, unalloyed hate. That is why we will defeat the Imperium in the end. We hate as they never could.
Those who remember their names beg to be destroyed. Those who have lost their names beg to kill. Warbands therefore wrap them in chains and smother them with wards between campaigns. Imperial countermeasures must be disciplined and enforced in all serving military units. Small arms fire chatters harmlessly against its plates. Fusion and grav fire bite through. Sustained las fire burns in if marksmen hold aim and the target is pinned. Demolition charges placed under the knee joints topple the walker and open a path to a finishing strike. Lone squads that attempt to outfight a Hellbrute at close range die. Units that blind it, fix it with traps and suppressive fire, and then cut its heart with light, often prevail, though not without loss. The Inquisition's standing judgment is plain. A Hellbrute is a heretic, fused into a walking sin, an already condemned soul, a weapon that must be silenced. In a minute, we'll dive into the horrific lore of the twisted creatures known as Chaos Spawn. But before we do, if you're enjoying this video, consider checking out our 3D lore overview of the Death Guard Legion. I'm going to go off script here so I can speak a little candidly. I definitely recommend checking out the Death Guard Legion video, especially if you're one of our viewers that really like the Warhammer tabletop game. Because Schroyer actually took a lot of time to learn Unreal Engine and actually scanned his own real-life Death Guard minis, his army, and put them into this virtual diorama of an actual battle, and it is so sick. And he also adds all these special effects like muzzle flashes from the bolters and smoke and fire and stuff like that. It's really cool. It makes it for a very cinematic experience. And on top of all of that, the Death Guard video probably has the best voice work we have on the channel right now. Even if I do say so myself, being one of the voice actors. But thank you to Adam Marl, or Fantasy Bound Productions, and Son of Sonnet for doing an incredible job on that video. I 100% recommend it. It's probably the best video we put out this year, so definitely check it out. In that lore exploration, you'll get their origin, key characters, battlefield doctrine, and why their plague-ridden crusades are so feared. Plus a quick tour of their signature war gear and their most iconic units. We built it with cinematic 3D visuals and clear chapter markers. So whether you're new to Warhammer or a long-time veteran, you can jump straight to what interests you. The link is on screen, in the description, and in the pinned comment. We hope you are enjoying the content. Chaos Spawn were what remained when the gifts of the Dark Gods ran unchecked. Champions sought glory and power. Yet for every soul raised to a prince, there were 100 who slid into this ruin. The descent began as mutation and ended as a storm of growth that never ceased. Bone split, skin flowered into maws and eyes, limbs multiplied in wrong places. The mind sagged beneath the constant scream of the warp until language and memory fell away. What remained was only appetite and pain turned outward. Creation followed many paths. A sorcerer poured raw imperial energy through a subject and burned away reason in a single hour. A warlord punished failure by calling down a blighted benediction that knotted the body into a heaving mass. Some champions gained boon upon boon until the will of favor broke, and the gods laughed as the body collapsed into a chaos spawn. Cultists begged for transfiguration.
The power of chaos is within me.
And found instead a prison of flesh that never slept. Their physiology is completely unstable. Each specimen continued to change, twitch, extrude and absorb. Reports described carapace plates that grew and softened into slugs, then hardened again. Eyes budding like fungus, and sank back as teeth erupted in their place. Many bore knotted cords of muscle that pulsed with a rhythm that imitated a heart, yet belonged to something else. Combat logs report that tranquilizers dulled them for moments. Pain excited them, but fire works the best. But even then, the charred stumps crawled until reduced to ash. Severed pieces lived for minutes and tried to rejoin the whole.
Though the gates that stand between the mortal world and the immortal realm of chaos are now closed to me, still, I would rather die having glimpsed eternity than never to have stirred from the cold furrow of mortal life. I embrace death without regret, as I have embraced life without fear.
On the field, Chaos Spawn move with dreadful unpredictability. Some flow like boneless predators, sliding under barricades and ropes of meat. Others are bound in spasms that carry them over walls. They neither fear nor parley. They strike the nearest living thing and tear it apart with whatever tools their bodies supply at that moment. Claws become spears, then hooks, then mouths that bite through ceramite. Bolter rounds stagger them without stopping the charge. Plasma cauterizes, but does not always kill. Missiles blow fragments across the ground, and the fragments twitch. Lesser known, but relevant, are cases of partial response. A few sorcerers boast that they leash a fragment of the original mind. Ordo Malleus records include witnesses who have seen a spawn hesitate when addressed by a former name, as if listening from far away. The pause never lasts, though. Their rage returns in a rush. Another caution concerns ambient hazard. In hives already touched by warp leakage, proximity to a large mass of spawn tissue seems to hasten secondary mutation in vermin and carrion insects that happen to be nearby. The effects on humans remains unproven, yet quarantine protocols advise distance, masks, warding incense, and rapid incineration of any remains. Recommended countermeasures against these creatures stress speed and containment. Isolate sightlines. Use flame, melta, or burning promethium. Mine approach lanes. Employ grav snares to pin the bulk, and finish with focused light. Avoid entangling fights. Never attempt capture, unless a Magos Biologus with an execution writ stands present. Even then, transport requires sealed caskets with geomantic wards and a kill switch that floods the container with liquid fire. Do not keep trophies. Do not fashion reliquaries from their parts, as contamination follows pride. Chaos Spawn are failure made flesh. They show the road that most servants of ruin finally walk. There is no cure. There is no bargaining. Destroy them without delay. If pity stirs, bury it, as pity for these abominations feeds the thing that watches from the dark and waits to change the merciful into meat. The Mutalith Vortex Beast is a moving rupture in reality, bound to flesh. It advances on pillar-like limbs, a mountain of muscle and plates. Yet the true threat blooms above its spine. There a swirling organ gapes like a hungry star, a living vortex that drinks color, bends sound into a low moan, and sloughs fragments of unreality. The creature does not simply kill, it mutates the world around it, and then keeps walking. Origins vary by account, yet each line ends at the same conclusion. Sorcerers of the arch-enemy drive them from places where the immaterium leaks upwards. Often this occurs when dozens of chaos spawn get caught in an empiric eddy and are fused together by the swirl of raw magic. Some are bred from monstrous stock and fed on warp-saturated carcasses until the dorsal organ opens like a third eye. Others are dragged in chains from cursed steppe-lands, where the ground never cools and the air is choked with warp currents. Warpsmiths collar these brutes with hex-laden iron and hammer runes into their plates. None claim mastery for long, though. The beast obeys the strongest voice in the moment, then follows the current of the warp, as a shark follows blood. The dorsal vortex births horn-like ridges and crystalline growths, then swallows them back when its appetite shifts. Mouths bud along the flanks and chant in languages that hurt to hear. Eyes appear in wrong places and track things that no auspex records. The beast exhales a smell of copper and lightning. Vox beads hiss with static in its presence. Candle flames stretch toward it. Fluids crawl uphill. The ground under its bulk may ripple as if it is skin. Servitors that touch its trail develop teeth in their palms and try to prey with their hands. The creature hunts by sensation more than sight. It moves toward concentrations of psychic activity with grave patience, as if the colossal monster is listening to a tide and moving towards it. Librarians who stand their ground feel their thoughts tugged loose and then wiped away, Even untrained minds suffer. Witnesses report terrible headaches that arrive like thunderclaps. Some begin to bleed from their ears and cannot stop. The dorsal organ pulses in answer, and the pressure in the air spikes, then drops. Warbands make use of the Mutalith as a walking altar, and as artillery that never runs out. The Thousand Suns Legion covens herd one at the center of a host, feeding it offerings of bound psychers so that the vortex fattens and throws out mutagenic waves that harden allied flesh and twist the foe. Word-bearers chant until the beast hums, and then aim it at a reliquary or shrine. The reliquary opens like bread and spills ghosts. Iron warriors drive their beasts at bastions to unpick Pharaohcrete with slow tides of unreality. Night Lords prefer to let the creature wander in the dark, while they harvest panic from the Vox traffic that follows. On the field of battle, when these beasts are unleashed, the Mutalith moves with awful momentum. Tentacles uncoil from the belly and scour the ground. When the dorsal organ flares, a cone of mutagenic light sweeps out, and reality reacts like wax near a forge. Armor softens and grows fibers. Lesser known yet consistent phenomena occur at range. The beast sheds motes of a powder that clings to lenses and tastes of salt. The motes hatch into tiny eyes if they are not burned. Birds that cross its wake fall from the sky with stones where their hearts should be. Water near the beast curdles and becomes syrup. If the dorsal organ drinks deeply during the battle, the creature often pauses to retch a cone of glittering sludge.
The heretics cannot call on that abomination again.
Anything alive that touches the swill twitches and grows new parts in a horrible and fast process of mutation until it dies. The Mutalith Vortex Beast is a wound in reality that walks. It grows where prayers are thinned and moves, planting terror wherever it goes. There is no bargain to strike. Burn it, bury the ash, and sanctify the earth, as this creature from the warp is vanished. Then leave, and do not return until the wind forgets the sound it made. And with that, we close our lore overview of these warp-touched horrors. If you want more grim lore, we invite you to watch our latest episode on the Death Guard Legion to see the Sons of Mortarion in action. As always, we thank you for watching, and we hope to see you in our next video.